Welcome to the Turningwood.com studios. Today we're going to try out some new tools from Laurent Niclot, and they're for small hollowing. If you haven't seen his teapots, they're phenomenal. You need to go on to the Google and search his name and definitely see some of his videos. But today we're going to use his tools and we're going to try to make an ornament ball. I haven't made ornaments for a long time, so we'll have to see how this goes. Stick around, you'll enjoy it. All right, so I've already rounded this piece of Pernambuco. This is a South American hardwood. And right now it's in these really small dovetail jaws, and I don't like how little contact area they have. So I have a big point here. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and make a new dovetail here and turn this around so that I have more contact area here. Let's give her a whirl. So I have, this is actually a shear scraper, but it works really good for this function. Let's see how close I got here. Retract that pup, loosen this pup, put in that pup. Oh yeah, that's better, that's better, that's better, that's better. So the more contact area I can get that's truly round, instead of the way the jaws work is they have a point on each end. So, all right, let's give her a whirl now. So what I'm going to do is retract this point in the live center so that I have just a little bit sticking out. That way, if there's a problem, it's easy to reposition it because I don't have to make as much of an adjustment as if there was a big chunk sticking out. So my weapon of choice initially is going to be this 3/8 gouge. It's a fingernail ground gouge, spindle gouge, whatever you want to call it. And we want to make sure that it's sharp. So we run this CBN hone down it, and let's get to work. Got stuff to do here. Now I'd like to tell you that I'm going to make a perfect ball. The reality is I can make a great one on one side, but the other side not so much. So we do what we can and see how it works out. Okay, for a perfect sphere, this is going to be half, roughly. So I use this compass since I can't find my dividers. And we go here. So that's going to be the exit. That would be the other side of the circle. So then what we do is make some room here. We're essentially making the half of the next one. And thankfully I watched Cindy's video Finial Star, which told me to start this just like a cove with this 90 degrees. So that is very helpful to avoid skating the gouge. All right, Now we start nibbling at this side. Looks pretty good. So as you're going down, you want to tip the handle of the gouge up as you move in, and you're rotating the gouge as well. And there we go. It's shown its ugly face that I am not great at the circles. That's okay though. Let me show you why it doesn't matter. All right. Now, since this is a hard enough wood, let's look and see what we can do to clean up those lines with a shear scraper. So for shear scraping, I want to get this right at about center exactly. A little high. And just take little nibbles to clean off my bad gouge work. What we don't want to do is chip it up too much, because the gouge cuts pretty clean. But what I've done is made ridges. So let's see how this works so far. It's pretty clean. It's chipped up a little bit here. We can clean that up some. And honestly, nobody's going to know that you didn't make it a ball, or you intended to make a ball and didn't succeed. So let's work on this a little more. Now what you don't see is this is, in case I am going to do some sanding, I'm going to want to make sure that I have some good dust evacuation. I'm not wearing a respirator, which I normally would, because I need to be able to talk. Okay, that looks pretty good. Much cleaner. All right, so just outside of view here, this is a 4-inch dust collector hose that's propped up here. And then I have my piece here, and we're going to start with 180 and see how clean it looks, because you can always go back down. That's the easy part. Okay, let's give it a whirl. So you could use either, out of my products anyway, Mirka Gold, or you could use Abranet. Abranet would be much better if this was a really oily hardwood, just because it's not going to get as much buildup like you see on the orange on the paper here. All right, let's see how that went. Looks pretty good. It has some surface checks in it. We'll have to see what happens when we get a little into hollowing and how that develops out. All right, let's keep a running. You notice I pulled the tail or the banjo away because I want to make sure that I'm not having to get in the way of the steady. All right, there's my 180. 240. And you might want to fold it up and get down in there, or even back off the tailstock completely. Quick 320, and we'll check out what it looks like now. Looks pretty good. I'm checking to make sure we don't have a lot of circular scratches here, because coming back to that is going to be a nightmare. After you go to a high finish, you're going to have to go back down all the way. There is a little bit here that you may not be able to see, but that's all right too. We can fix that because we're going to show you how to help yourself out in some situations here and see if we can't fix the problems we've created. All right, so I have in the tailstock in a Jacob's chuck a 3/8 drill, and I'm gonna drill down the center. Hopefully it stays centered. Ideally you would want a shorter bit, but it's what I have, so I'm gonna slow the speed down a little. Not too bad. It doesn't appear to be wandering too far, although the fact that I didn't cut down far enough, we'll fix that too before we go on much further. It's very warm. You know, this wood's been in my shop for probably 15 years, but that just means that it's reached equilibrium moisture content. It's only dry as the environment that it's in. Okay, here's where we find out how well the gouges or the pieces held in the chuck. That's for sure. Because we're going to take off this nub. And the gouge cuts pretty cleanly. In fact, it's probably cleaner than it was sanded. So this diagram is similar to almost everyone you've ever seen in hollowing, is that we already have a hole down the center. So this would be the first place you want to evacuate. And the idea is to make enough room so that the chips don't bind up the cutting head. So then what we want to do is go in with the straight tool and then carve out this section number 2. You notice that we're carving from the front back, because if we did it from the back, then this becomes a weak point. It could flex, it could break, etc. Then we're going to come through and take out number 3 here, and then come back and take out what would be this area here, number 4. Let's take a look at the tools. The tools are made of high-speed steel, and then the end is grooved for a cutting surface. A set is a straight shaft and an elbow, available in either 3/16 shaft or 1/4-inch shaft. The 3/16 goes into a 3/8 handle. The 1/4-inch goes into a 1/2-inch handle. You can buy them as a set with just the two tools, or you can buy them as a superset where it comes with a Trent Bosch handle. The 3/16 comes with a 12-inch 3/8 handle, and the 1/4-inch comes with a 16-inch 1/2-inch handle. All right, so we have a 3/8 hole. So I'm going to use these 3/16 tools. These are fairly new. Laurent Niclot uses them to make his small teapots. And so I have them in Bosch handles, which you can't see. There we go. And so what we're going to do is kind of judge how deep I would be if I went all the way in. I have my tool rest right at about the bottom, because what I want to make sure is that I don't bottom out the tool in the bottom of the hole, because then it's more likely to get picked up and washed around, and that leads to ripping out the mouth or the opening. So if I judge, I can go right to about here. This would be the total depth. If I were to just place this in, it's about right there. So we'll start that. And then what I have is my air hose. And with a dry wood, with an exotic, this is a mixed bag, because if you got a wood that's overheating and you blow air into it, you're going to induce stress cracks. It's a given. Ebony is probably the biggest candidate for that kind of problem. Snakewood, don't do this, something like that. So let's try a little bit of hollowing now. So all you're doing is trying to clear out that cavity just a little bit and give yourself a little bit more space. All right. Stop the lathe. Ideally, you have your air on, your dust evacuation on. Okay, and you notice that the writing of the tool here, the laser engraving, is dead flat to the flat on the cutter. So you know that if you tilt it this way, you're going to get a different cut than keeping it straight up and down. All right, so what we're essentially doing here is evacuating the space so that we can get in and make the walls thinner. If it's cutting too aggressively, just drop it a little bit. Twist the handle to drop it. And don't forget to clear often. You don't want to get bound up in there. Nobody likes being bound up. What you can't see is, if I zoom away you can, here's my air right now. And so what I do is place the nozzle inside, go very lightly, just use my hand to deflect it, and it goes down there. It doesn't cover all of it, it doesn't get all of it, but some's way better than none in this case. All right, go in here, and what you're doing is you're dropping the hook and it will cut less aggressive. But remember, once you drop the hook, you're now below the center, so to remove it, you need to roll the tool back up. Since it's an ornament, I'm not really super concerned with how thin it's going to be. I just don't want it to be so heavy that if it gets put on a tree, that it's going to bend the bough. All right, let's get some of that back. I can tell there's still a lot of meat in the back. Now, because of the shape of the cutter, it'll cut in a push or a pull motion. Okay, and just like you, I kind of get a little paranoid that I'm going to go through the back end. So I'm not super worried about it because I think I have an idea of how to fix that. Oh, got some whistle. So once we get to that point, we'll get a little bit, I'll show you how to deal with that. All right, so right now I'm probably about like this. Maybe a little thick here, because I like to leave some thickness here so that if I do get a tool catch, it doesn't rip the mouth out. And then I have probably a little bit extra depth here and always here, almost always here, because I'm bad at judging the depth. But we'll see how that works out. Once we cut it off, that's the moment of truth. So, all right, let's take one more stab at the sides on the entry with the tool dipped. And just being really gentle in there. Now, if you want to cut more aggressive, all you got to do is just twist the back of the handle. Brings that cutter up. All right. Now let's get the back a little bit. Check my depth. I can be about right there. Yeah, we should probably be good then. Maybe a little bit here. Oops. And just roll that around the corner. Little dig. All right, we're going to call the hollowing good right now, and let's see what we got. Let's finish up the end here, do a little bit more sanding, just a tiny bit more. Okay, that looks bueno. All right, at this point, I have it all hollowed out, or as far as I'm going to get. And then what I'm going to do is use this really thin parting tool to come in here. But I want to leave a little bit of meat here, so I'm going to back off a little. I'm going to cut a little bit into here to give me some clearance. And for this, I'm going to use Cindy's super fine gouge. Now remember that I already have a 3/8 hole going through there. So what I want to do then is support it and kind of come in at an angle and cut through what is now that tunnel. So I see I have a little ridge here. I can see that there's probably about 3/8 of an inch thickness in there in the backside. It's not particularly heavy, but we can clean that up a little bit by using a couple different methods. The first one we'll look at is a vacuum chuck. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is use a vacuum chuck. What a vacuum chuck does is you have a through hole here, you have a through hole in your headstock that goes all the way through, and then there is a union at the back of the headstock that is affixed to a vacuum pump, and then we have a vacuum gauge here. And of note, vacuum is not in PSI, it is in inches of mercury. And so what we're going to do is Because we have a through hole here, I have a silicone plug in the back. Let's see how well this works. All right, one way to improve the alignment to make sure this is running completely concentric is to use some kind of wife center device. In this case, what I have is actually a pen mandrel. So it's a dead center, but it has a nylon bushing on it. So you could just back it like this, put your tailstock up, kind of align it as good as you can. Turn on your vacuum. And then just pull the tailstock away. Pull the tailstock away. And that's really close. Vacuum pump is running. Let's take off a little bit of material on the inside. Just lighten it up a little. You don't want to push too hard, because if you break that vacuum by pulling it away from the rubber, then it can potentially go flying. Like that. All right, but it didn't break anything. That's what counts. All right, we got the vacuum on. We're going to use this Cindy's tool here. It's a really small, very fine point gouge, and we're going to just ever so gently try and remove that rim. You don't want to push hard, because we only have so much vacuum to spare. Now we want to make the end look like it's the bottom of a ball. So we want to continue this curve so that when we get to the end here, there is no lumps or flat spots. It's just one smooth curve. That's pretty good. All right, so now what we're going to do, the final bit here, is while we still have vacuum, is we're going to clean up that spot with some sanding. Okay, we still have vacuum. I never drop the vacuum, so that way it remains concentric. So I've brought up my dust collector, and you notice it has this grid on it. So that way, if the vacuum breaks, it doesn't go flying into that and then get sucked up into the dust collector and never to be seen again in all my work down the drain, so to speak. All right, so you can see we still have vacuum. I'm at about 16 inches of mercury. We're going to slow the lathe down a little. Turn on the dust collector. Start with 240 this time.
then 320. Then 400. Okay, you'll notice that our pattern doesn't exactly look the same as before. Some of that is because this was the back end, so it was sanded in a different direction. Let's see how to deal with that next. Delicious.
Another way to do some final finishing, sanding, etc. on this is to put it between centers. So we have a pen mandrel here, and we have these nylon finishing bushings. And so what we're going to do is put this on there between centers, and then use a bushing on the back side. Bring our mandrel tailstock up. You don't want to push too hard because you are exerting forces here. So if you push too hard, you snap it and you start all over at the beginning of the video. But what this allows us to do then is, if I want to do, say, a CA finish, I could do that now. If I wanted to do finer sanding, buffing by hand, etc., we could now do it. Let's talk about finishing, shall we? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the CA finish, but in a different way. I'm not actually going to build it up and then buff the CA. What I'm going to do is this is Parafix 3408. It is super, super thin, 0.05 CPS. So we're going to turn the lathe on and spin the piece very slowly because we don't want to get CA all over the shop. And I am such a messy person anyway. And all we're doing is giving it just a really light coat, kind of like as if it's an oil. Oops, and I already sprayed it out of the shop. So this has about a 45-second set time. Kind of like time delayed. And I'm not going to use any activator. And to get into the corner, we'll wet that part and then just kind of dip it there. All right, so this gives us a nice satin finish. And it's super durable. As I keep spraying it all over the shop. And we'll let that set up. Ooh, pretty. What was it? Delicious. So now that this is dry, what I'm going to do is just run some dry Abralon up against it. We'll start at 1,000 and see what kind of sheen we get there. I expect will just be kind of a dull finish, which is what I'm looking for here. What I really want to do is just knock the nibs off and make it smooth, because you do get a little bit of texture from just the glue kind of settling down and drying. Now to get into these corners here, you just need to take the edge of the paper
or the medium, whatever you want to call it, and just kind of be a little bit diligent in there. It seems really nice and smooth. And you're going to get a little bit of the pores filled with the glue. You get the white specks there. So let's hit it with some air and see how that works out. That's pretty. That's a keeper right there.
So let's take a look at the finished product here. So it's Pernambuco. It's about 1.5 inches maybe. You can see the wall thickness there is not bad. It's definitely under 1/4. And this one's even a little bit better. So all in all, this will make a wonderful ornament. Now, as you look at this, it's going to be a little bit heavier on one end. So all we want to do then is when we put the icicles in, the finials, we'll make that the bottom, and that way your eye will be naturally drawn towards that, and it'll look a little bit more evenly weighted. Well, you've made it this far. So you've either watched the whole video or for some odd reason fast forwarded to the end. But thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. It was more about how to use small hollow form tools than it was about ornament, but I was doing a ornament demo, so it worked out perfectly. The reality is it took days of shooting. I do all my own studio work here, so it was a lot of fun, a lot of learning curve, and hopefully from that the next videos come out better. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.